Everybody, welcome back to another episode of Shifty's 49ers Talk. In this video, we are going to discuss 5 free agents that I believe the 49ers should look to bring in. And I think it's possible, not likely, but I think it's possible we actually could bring in all of these guys, some of them a little bit under the radar. But let's not waste any more time. Let's jump right into it. In this video, yes, we are going to discuss 5 free agents the Niners, I believe, should bring in. Now, we're not going to talk about players that could be re-signed by the team. We're strictly going to focus on external free agents that I think would be a benefit, not only to the team just for the season, but of course, putting us into a good position heading into the draft as well. Now, the first guy that I really want to bring in is someone who's a veteran quarterback, because I think that that's going to be a huge need. The player is going to be Taylor Heinicke. Now, before we get into talking about Heineke a little bit, let's talk about why we're going to bring in a veteran quarterback. Well, Trey Lance, I think he is going to be the starter come week 1. Brock Purdy, of course, he played really, really well down the stretch, and he could potentially be a long-term starter for San Francisco, depending on what happens with Trey Lance and everything. But I think Brock Purdy is most likely the Niners will err on the side of caution, and I think he'll be put on the IR, therefore missing the first 6 games of the season. And as we all saw last year, yes, we absolutely need a quarterback to back up Trey Lance just in case anything happens. That's me knocking on wood. So the guy we're going to look at is Taylor Heinicke. Now, let's get to know Heinicke a little bit, shall we? So he's 30 years old. He's 6'1", 210 pounds, originally an undrafted free agent out of Old Dominion. You don't really hear about that school too often playing in the NFL. Now, he did enter the NFL in 2017. He spent a number of years with Houston, with Carolina, and then he went to Washington. And that's really, in Washington, is where he made somewhat of a name for himself. He finished off the year in 2020, actually starting in a playoff game. And if you look at that, he played pretty well considering that was one of his first NFL starts, and in the playoffs, threw for over 300 yards, a touchdown, interception, had about 40 rushing yards, and a touchdown to boot there. Heineke really saw more extended action in 2021. He played in 15 of the 17 games for the Commanders. Overall numbers were pretty solid. He had about 3,400 yards passing, 20 touchdowns, 15 interceptions. He did run for 300 yards, which shows some mobility that you like. However, he did have 7 fumbles throughout the year, which would be a fumble rate similar, comparable to a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, last year, things got a little bit different for Heineke. We saw the Commanders traded for Carson Wentz. I think the Commanders, really liked Wentz in the offseason leading up to the regular season, and Wentz was playing okay football, I guess, with Washington. Then he got hurt, and then Taylor Heinicke comes in, and he really puts up some solid numbers. About 1,850 yards, 12 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, completion rate in and around the 64% range, but I thought he did a very solid job for the Commanders. Now, why do I like Taylor Heinicke? Well, I think there's a number of reasons where he would fit in with San Francisco. Number one, he does have some ability that we've seen from some of his stats. I think the big thing, too, is that Taylor Heinicke is not someone who's going to rock the boat. When the Commanders traded for Carson Wentz, and they were kind of announcing, hey, Wentz is going to be the starter, Heineke's like, look, I'm the backup. I know I'm the backup. That's fine. And I think that that's really the mindset that you want to have for the 49ers. You don't necessarily want to bring in a guy, let's say, like Matt Ryan, who's like, I want to start. I've been a starter my whole career. I want to start. I think you want to have a guy come in who's been around the NFL for a while, has played in some big games, played in a playoff game, beat the undefeated Philadelphia Eagles during the 2022 season, and overall, I think he'd just be a really great fit. Personality-wise, I think he has a really good skill set, and it just makes a lot of sense. I think he could be had at a reasonable contract. I would say maybe it would be a 1 to 2 year deal, probably in the, maybe $4 million a year, $3 to $4 million a year range, which some people might say is a little bit high for a backup quarterback. However, I think that we saw just how important it is to have a good backup quarterback last year. And so Taylor Heinicke is the first guy that I think the 49ers should look to bring in. The next guy that I want to talk about is someone who I think a number of people mentioned, but that's going to be tight end Austin Hooper. Now, Hooper, 28 years old, so still relatively young, came in the league in 2016, drafted by the Atlanta Falcons in the 3rd round, and if we remember, Kyle Shanahan was the offensive coordinator in Atlanta in 2016. So I think, of course, he would have been consulted on what players that Falcons should have drafted, especially on the offensive side of the ball, because their head coach at the time, Dan Quinn's a defensive-minded guy. So I think clearly Shanahan likes him. I believe Austin Hooper, after the 2019 season, was a free agent. I want to say the 49ers were reportedly interested in bringing him in. Ultimately, he signed a bigger deal with the Cleveland Browns. But he's 6'4", 255 pounds, went to Stanford, so John Lynch might have a little bit of bias towards signing him there too. But overall, I think he's just a really good fit for the Shanahan offense. Now, in terms of blocking, and of course that's a huge thing for Shanahan, I think he's a willing blocker, you have to say that. He puts in the effort. He's not going to be a George Kittle type blocker, but where I think his value is in his receiving ability. You look at things like his drop rate, only 3.7% drop rate in the last 4 or 5 years, very on par with a guy like George Kittle, 25 touchdowns in his career. And here's a huge stat, which I know that any coach will like, is that in his career, he's never fumbled the football. So that's something that you're going to get, basically solid production out of him. He's kind of averaging maybe 500 to 700 yards a season, maybe 4 to 7 touchdowns a year, which I think would be probably even too much. I don't think the Niners would even count on him that much, but I think he'd be a really solid number 2 tight end. I think Charlie Werner has shown that he's really not much more of a blocker, so we need a receiving threat at tight end, and I think he'd pair really well with George Kittle, and I think it would just be a really good move. I think he could be had for also a reasonable price. You probably get him on a 1-year deal, maybe for, maybe $3 million or something like that, nothing crazy, and I think it would be a really solid investment. I want to say that the Niners are really just screaming out to have a legitimate number 2 tight end. I also wouldn't put it past the 49ers to invest in a tight end in the draft. So if you were to bring in Austin Hooper, it definitely reduces the need for tight end, but I could still see us maybe with one of those 5th round picks going for a tight end as well. Niners love to carry 4 tight ends on the roster, and I think it's a distinct possibility in 2023, especially if we bring in a guy like Austin Hooper, who I think, again, is a great fit for the offense. The next player that we're going to cover here, and actually the final 3 players in this video, are all going to be on the defensive side of the ball. Now, the first guy we're going to talk about, it's going to be Shy Tuttle, defensive tackle. He spent the last 4 years with the New Orleans Saints. He's 27 years old, 6'3", 302 pounds, actually an undrafted free agent out of Tennessee, the Volunteers. But someone who I think is really, really coming into his own as a player. He's 27 years old, so still pretty young, but he's actually played a decent amount of football the last number of years with the Saints. And here's the thing too, he's been a starter for the Saints on especially those base downs, and that's what we're going to talk about, is run defense. But the Saints defense the last 3-4 years has been really, really good. Essentially top 10 in most categories the last 3 years. So for him to be able to come in and be a relatively consistent starter on a top 10 defense, I think that sounds like exactly what the 49ers need. Now, when you look at Shy Tuttle, before again we get into his game, something that I think is really, really big is that in his career, in 4 seasons, he's only missed 3 games, which is essentially a polar opposite to a guy like Javon Kinlaw, who feels like he's only played 3 games in some ways. But I think he's a really good plus run defender. He's got really good size. He's actually pretty athletic for his size too. I was watching a number of the Saints games just in kind of preparation for this video. The game that really stood out to me was actually the game against the Eagles. I thought he did a really good job taking on like double teams, really holding his own, holding his ground. And that's really what you're looking for a guy from this position, because if a guy like him can do that, then that allows Nick Bosa, that allows Eric Armstead, that allows Drake Jackson and others to really get those one-on-one matchups to get after the quarterback or else stop the run. So I really do like Shy Tuttle, and I think he could almost immediately take the spot of a guy like Javon Kinlaw, who just hasn't really performed up to expectations, I think is a very fair thing to say, and also just hasn't been out there that often, whereas a guy like Tuttle, very, very reliable too. Now, he is someone who had 5 passes defensed in 2022, so to me that shows pretty good awareness in terms of what the play recognition is, getting his hands up, blocking those passes, and that really, sometimes an incomplete pass can be almost as good as a sack. It could be the difference between just 1 or 2 yards right there. Also last season, looking at his numbers, 2 sacks, a tackle for loss, 3 quarterback hits. But overall, Shy Tuttle's game is about stopping the run, and I think that that's really where we're going to need some help. We did see the Eagles were able to gash us pretty badly when it came to the playoffs. I think Tuttle really helps out with that. You know he's going to be out there. He's played in about 40 to 50% of the defensive snaps for the Saints the last couple of years, and just a reliable guy that you can count on week in and week out. Going to make some really good plays. Not going to be, again, a huge pass rushing defensive tackle, but we're not going to ask him to do that. I think he'll really help out in the run game, and I believe him, Armstead, Bosa, and then Drake Jackson or whatever other defensive ends we bring in, that would be a really, really good defensive line. And you can even rotate in. You have a rotation with guys like Javon Kinlaw, Kevin Givens, and so on. But I do like this move. He's still young, still growing, still a lot of good football ahead of him, and he's proven he can stay healthy. The fourth player that I want to cover in this video, and who I think the 49ers should look to sign in free agency, is going to be Bryce Callahan, the cornerback last season with the Chargers, before that with the Broncos, and before that with the Chicago Bears. Now, Bryce Callahan, 5'9", 188 pounds, originally an undrafted free agent out of Rice. He is 31 years old. Now, Bryce Callahan, he's a guy who's going to play in the nickel, going to play in the slot, always going to be focused inside. When you look at his numbers from last season in 2022 with the LA Chargers, 3 interceptions, one of those for a pick 6 against the Raiders, and also just really, he does excel in the slot. Now, I think Bryce Callahan could be had at a very reasonable price. He signed last year with the Chargers for about $1.25 million. I think maybe we get him for under $2 million in the offseason, maybe $1.5 to $2 million, and he gives us a lot of flexibility with regards to our secondary. I think that Lenoir finished the season really, really good for the 49ers. Of course, Mooney Ward's going to be there too. They're on the outside. Then you have a veteran guy here like a Bryce Callahan, and also Sammy Womack, who can interchangeably play on the inside. Now, if a team goes to like 4 wide receiver sets, then you have both Callahan and Womack out there. Now, I think it's a really good idea to bring him in. He's someone who has a ton of experience, of course, playing in the NFL for a number of years, and I think he's seen a lot of different things. He's been tasked with some really difficult jobs. A lot of times when they played the Raiders last year, he was one of the main guys who was actually on Devontae Adams, so you love to see that. He's up for a challenge. Now, when it comes to a 2, which I really like, is that he actually has a decent amount of experience blitzing quarterbacks from the slot. Last year alone, he was sent 16 times, so basically 1 time per game. He was sent on a blitz. He had a number of quarterback hits and a number of quarterback hurries throughout the year, so you love to see that as well. And again, I think this really gives the 49ers a good mix in the cornerback room for having some experience, and then also younger players who are still developing. So you have the experienced guys like Mooney Ward, and then you bring in a Bryce Callahan. You have some young up-and-coming guys like Lenoir, Sammy Womack, Ambry Thomas, and that's 5 cornerbacks right there. And I think the cornerback room, people, of course, you want to bring back an Emmanuel Mosley, you want to sign some other big-name free agent, but I think all in all, when you look at Bryce Callahan's play, how well he's played very solid, and he's coming to a really, really good defense here in San Francisco, could even play better, and he's coming for a very reasonable price. It gives the 49ers flexibility for the draft, and we still have decent depth at cornerback, so I think that there's really no downside. The only thing that I could mention is that, yes, he's definitely missed a little bit of time with injuries, but really not that much. Last season, it shows that he missed 2 games, really only missed 1. Week 18, he didn't play because they were resting him. But overall, I think this would be a really smart move by the 49ers. Alrighty, folks, and now to round out the video, the 5th guy that we're going to talk about technically is not a free agent yet, but is by all accounts going to be released by the LA Rams, and that is going to be Leonard Floyd. Now, Leonard Floyd, former 9th overall pick by the Chicago Bears back in 2016 out of Georgia. Looking at Leonard Floyd right now, he's 31 years old, 6'5", 240 pounds. Now, the first thing that I think people might mention about Leonard Floyd is, might say, well, he was kind of a bust in Chicago, and I think yes, he kind of was. I mean, in 4 years, he did have about 18 sacks, so he wasn't a complete disaster, not like a Solomon Thomas, for example, in terms of production, but he didn't live up to expectations. Then he goes to the Rams, and man, he performs really, really well. Let's take a look at some of his numbers with the LA Rams the last 3 seasons that he's been there. 29 sacks in the last 3 years. Each of those years, he's had at least 9 sacks. So he's had, in 2020 was 10.5 sacks, 2021 9.5, and then last season 9 sacks. So it kind of goes to show you just how well he can play, especially when you put him around talent and just in a really good defensive system. And again, kind of talking about the system, Leonard Floyd has typically played that will linebacker role, where similar to like how like Aldon Smith, in that kind of role back in the day when we had the 3-4 defense. I do think it would be a relatively seamless transition for him, though, to come to the 49ers, play in the wide 9. Of course, you're going to have to go into the stance where you got your hand on the dirt. Typically, not all the time, though. We see guys like Bosa and Ebukam who would have rushed from their feet, but I think it's a really good fit. Another thing that I love about Leonard Floyd is since 2017, he hasn't missed a game, which is just crazy to think. He's just Mr. Consistent, Mr. Reliable, especially the last 3 years. So 30 pressures per season against opposing quarterbacks, at least 30 pressures per season the last 3 years. Hasn't missed a game since 2017. He's really logged about 900 defensive snaps each of the last 4 years. So all signs point to him being almost the opposite of a D Ford, where he's going to be incredibly reliable. And that's somewhat of a consistency that you'll see throughout all of these players, is that they're reliable. They don't miss significant time. When you pay for guys in free agency, typically you do end up overpaying. However, when you get guys who are consistently on the field, I think it's a really smart move. He's someone who I think would pair phenomenally well with a guy like Nick Bosa on the other side, can get after the quarterback, really force the quarterback back into the pocket. That's where you allow guys like Bosa, Armstead, and others to really feast and make some big plays. So I think this would be a phenomenal ad for the 49ers. And really, if we think back to last season, the Niners struggled to get any way consistent pressure outside of Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa was great, almost 20 sacks, defensive player of the year, and he deservedly won that. But really outside of that, there was no consistent pressure. A number of guys were kind of letdowns, like Ebukam, for example. But I think Leonard Floyd can come in. He hasn't been in the league that long, even though his age, gives it the impression that he has been around for a long time, but only since 2016, and he's been Mr. Consistent, Mr. Reliable. I think this would be a great move, and he's a great guy in the locker room to have, and I think this would be a fantastic move and a home run hit for the 49ers. Now, with this in mind, Leonard Floyd's going to cost a good bit of money. I think in terms of like strictly cap hits, probably looking at about $8 to $10 million a year, so he's not going to come cheap necessarily. However, I think he would absolutely be worth it, and again, this would give, like all of these moves, it gives the 49ers a lot of flexibility when it comes to the draft, that we can kind of just go the best player available route, that we don't have to force a pick. And that's really where I think the Niners do their best work, when we can just look and say, here's the best guy, let's take him. And we know the 49ers have had a lot of success in the middle to late rounds, and we have a whole bunch of picks, so I'm super excited for that. But overall, there you have it, guys. Those are the 5 free agents that I think the 49ers could pick up. Not necessarily saying they could pick up all 5, but I think maybe 3 or 4 of these guys would really help the team out, especially once we kind of get through with restructures. Probably going to restructure Fred Warner, Mooney Ward, Christian McCaffrey. You extend Bosa, which would actually reduce his cap hit in 2023. So a lot of moves the Niners here can make. And let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments below about the moves I've suggested here. If you have any players you think the 49ers should sign, and try and keep it relatively realistic, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you like the video, do consider liking the video and also subscribing to the channel, because it really helps me out. But there you have it, guys. Thank you so much for checking in on this video. Really appreciate you. And I'm going to say 2 things before I head out, and that's the butt counts, and I'll catch you guys on the flip side.